Hey, first graders! It is yet again the best time of the day when we get to read some great fiction and nonfiction together. Today we're going to continue reading about the explorers and settlers who started coming to North and South America after the Native Americans had been there for many, many years. Yesterday we finished reading about the country of Mexico and about the Spanish explorers and settlers. So now we're going to read about the settlers and explorers from the United Kingdom. And then after that we will read, I was thinking that we would read Cinderella, but then I remembered that there is a wonderful version of the Rumpelstiltskin story called Rumpelstiltskin's Daughter. And just like we enjoyed several different points of view or perspectives or extensions of the Three Little Pigs, I thought it would be a lot of fun to explore some extensions of the Rumpelstiltskin story. So yesterday we started with fiction and first and did nonfiction second, so I always try to keep things balanced. So today we will start with nonfiction and finish with fiction. Before we get started, I wanted to just give a little bit of background knowledge. A lot of times in books and in general, when people are talking about the United Kingdom, remember we read about the United Kingdom a couple weeks ago? Well, a lot of times people will use the words the United Kingdom or the UK and England. They'll interchange the two. They'll use them as synonyms. Even though in reality the United Kingdom is made up of, if you remember from when we read, it's made up of four sections. The biggest section is England. So if you look at this map, England runs from here all the way. So it's most of the island that the United Kingdom is on. Then the small part to the west is Wales. Small part to the north is Scotland. And over on the Irish island, Northern Ireland, is also part of the United Kingdom. But the biggest part is England. And so a lot of times, I'm not sure why, but maybe because England is one word and United Kingdom is two, people will just say England to mean all of the United Kingdom. And you know, most of the political and economic power, most of the power, the kings and queens of the United Kingdom all come from England, not from Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland. So that might be another reason, because England is the most powerful part of the United Kingdom. And it's also true that in the history of the United Kingdom, what is today the United Kingdom was originally England, and then England added Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland to its country to form the United Kingdom. So for whatever reason, you're going to read today, when we read about the explorers, they're going to talk about explorers from England, or they're going to refer to England. What they mean is the United Kingdom. Okay? All right. So now that we have that cleared, and remember England is where Big Ben and Westminster are at, right? And the King and Queen lived in Buckingham Palace. Where was that? There, Buckingham Palace and the guards, right? And London Bridge, London Tower. London is the capital of the United Kingdom and England. All right, so now that we remember that, let's read about the settlers and explorers who came from England or the United Kingdom to North and South America. So the subtitle is Queen Elizabeth and the Lost Colony. Some of the other European countries, other than Spain, because the first chapter was about Spain, so some of the other European countries, including England or the United Kingdom, sent their traders and fishermen to the, quote, New World, unquote, to make money. So that's what they called North and South America. They called it the New World. One ruler, Queen Elizabeth of England, wanted English settlers to go there and also take land, just as the Spanish and Portuguese had done. Did you see the appositive? One ruler, comma, Queen Elizabeth of England, comma, wanted English settlers to go there and also take land. So Queen Elizabeth being used as an appositive. And there's a famous picture of Queen Elizabeth. So remember, this is back in the 1500s, so 400 to 500 years ago. To do this, in other words, to take land, to take over land in North and South America, Queen Elizabeth needed someone brave enough to set off on a dangerous voyage to find land that could be settled on. She chose Sir Walter Raleigh. There's a picture of Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Walter set sail to explore the eastern coast of North America. He needed to find the perfect place to build an English colony. Sir Walter found just the spot. When he returned, he sent a group of men to Roanoke Island, just off the coast of what is today North Carolina. So that is a picture of a map from 500 years ago showing Roanoke Island, just off of North Carolina. Sir Walter felt sure that they would be able to set up an English colony on this small island. All right, so now just to give you some perspective on where this is farther north than where Mexico and Central America are. So Mexico and Central America are down here, but North Carolina is up here. So up north of Florida, North Carolina. So kind of in somewhat close to Washington, D.C., South Washington, D.C., right along here, these islands on the outer banks of North Carolina. So the English were exploring up here, while the Spanish and the Portuguese were mostly exploring down here. Okay? The first group of English settlers sent to Roanoke Island did not last long. Life there was too difficult, and they returned to England or the United Kingdom, leaving only 15 men behind. Sometime later, Sir Walter sent a second group of English men, women, and children to Roanoke Island to try again. For a while, things went well. Here's a picture of their settlement. A child named Virginia Dare was born there, but less than 3 years after they arrived, these settlers had all disappeared. No one knows for sure what happened to them. Look at this picture. It's a picture of that child, right? Virginia Dare being baptized by their priest at Roanoke Island. But after 3 years, they had all disappeared. Chapter 3. The English traveled to Virginia. For a while, the English did not send any more settlers to the New World, though they did continue to trade and fish there. These English traders brought back many valuable goods such as furs, lumber, and pearls. They became rich. There's fur, pelts from animals like beaver were they would kill the animals, take their fur, and sell them back in the United Kingdom for clothing and jackets and things like that. Eventually, some of these traders went to the new ruler of the United Kingdom, or England. His name was King James, with a plan. They wanted to try to, again, set up an English colony in the New World. And they wanted to send settlers to search for gold and silver. King James agreed. The traders hurried off to find ships, supplies, and men. Look at the interesting clothes that they wore back then. Very interesting. Just before Christmas, in 1606, 3 ships sailed into the Atlantic Ocean. So this is 114 years after Christopher Columbus. The 3 ships were named the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery. 105 male passengers and 39 sailors were on board. Also on board was a letter from King James telling the settlers what to do and how to behave when they arrived in the New World. And there's the British flag on top of the 3 ships. Soon after these English settlers set out, the winds died down and the sailing ships went nowhere. For 6 weeks, that's 42 days, the 3 ships sat in the Atlantic Ocean waiting for a wind to fill the sails and take them west. So that's about as long as, remember when we were in the season of Lent. We had a Lenten good deed every day. That was 40 days. So this is 42 days. For that long, as long as we had Lent, they sat out in the middle of the ocean with no wind, and they went nowhere. How do you think that felt? As they waited, the settlers ate food that they had planned to use in their new home. That's not good. They drank the water they had brought with them. And as the weeks went by, they became sick. Finally, strong winds did arrive, but the winds were so strong that they blew the ships in the wrong direction. Bad storms swept across the ocean, and enormous waves pounded the ships. Eventually, 4 months after leaving England, or the United Kingdom, the 3 ships arrived in what is today Virginia. Now, just to give you a reference point, Virginia is the state right above North Carolina. So this is North Carolina, and they have the picture of the White House on top of it because this is pretty close to Washington, D.C., where the White House is. But North Carolina is here, and then Virginia is right up here. So this is the area where these 3 ships wound up, just north of North Carolina, north of Roanoke. All right, so we will pause there and read about tomorrow about the new colony or settlement that the English started. And one of the famous stories about this experience is the leader of the group of English settlers. His name was John Smith, and there's a famous story, if you're familiar with the story of Pocahontas, that story comes from what happened to John Smith and the Native Americans that he and the other English settlers met in Virginia. All right, so we're going to pause there and turn to fiction. So our fiction story today an extension of Rumpelstiltskin. It's called Rumpelstiltskin's Daughter by Diane Stanley. And by the way, Diane Stanley is a great children's author. She's written a lot of great children's books. Once there was a miller's daughter who got into a heap of trouble. It was all because her father liked to make up stories and pass them off as truth. Unfortunately, the story that he told was that his daughter could spin straw into gold, which, of course, she could not. Even more unfortunately, he told this whopper in the hearing of a palace servant who rushed right off to tell the king. Since the king loved nothing in this world more than gold, he had the miller's daughter hauled up to the palace immediately and made her an offer she couldn't refuse. He put her in a room full of straw and ordered her to spin it into gold by morning or die. So it's interesting to compare the versions of the story in this book and in the book that we read. By one of those unlikely coincidences so common in fairy tales, no sooner had the king closed and bolted the door than a very small gentleman showed up and revealed that he really could spin straw into gold. Furthermore, he offered to do it in exchange for her necklace, which was made of gold tone metal and wasn't worth 10 cents. So it was like fake gold. Naturally, she agreed. The next morning, the king was so overjoyed with his room full of gold that he rewarded the miller's daughter by doubling the amount of straw and repeating his threat. Once again, Rumpelstiltskin, for that was his name, arrived to help her out. This time, she gave him her cigar band pinky ring. So are you sensing a difference between this story and the one we read? In the original story, the necklace and the ring appeared to be valuable, the ones that she gave up. In this story, we're being told that they really were not very valuable. But still, Rumpelstiltskin accepted them. After his second success, the king was practically apoplectic with greed. That means he couldn't control himself. He was full of greed. He proceeded to empty every barn in the neighborhood of straw and fill the room with it. This time, he added a little sugar to sweeten the pot. If she turned it all into gold, he would make her his queen. You can just imagine how the miller's daughter was feeling when Rumpelstiltskin popped in for a third time. "That's quite a pile," he said. "I suppose you want me to spin it into gold." "Well, the situation has changed just a bit," said the miller's daughter, who also had a name. It was Meredith. "If you don't spin it into gold, I will die. If you do spin it into gold, I will marry the king." Now that, thought Rumpelstiltskin, has possibilities. After all, getting to be the queen was a big step up for the miller's daughter. She would surely pay him anything. And there was only one thing in the world he really wanted: a little child to love and care for. "Okay, here's the deal. I will spin the straw into gold just like before. In return, Once you become queen, you must let me adopt your firstborn child. I promise I'll be an excellent father. I know all the lullabies. I'll read the child every day. I'll read to the child every day. I'll even coach Little League." "You've got to be kidding," Meredith said. "I'd rather marry you than that jerk." Ooh. Now the story seems to be changing a little differently than what we read before. Because now the miller's daughter said she'd rather marry Rumpelstiltskin than the king who was not very nice. "Really?" said Rumpelstiltskin. "You'd rather marry me than the king?" And he blushed all the way from the tip of his head to the tip of his toes, which admittedly wasn't very far because he was so short. "Sure," she said. "I like your ideas on parenting. You'd make a good provider, and I have a weakness for short men." So Rumpelstiltskin spun a gold ladder, and they escaped out of the window. They were married the very next day and lived happily together, far, far away from the palace. See, Rumpelstiltskin spun the ladder and they got away. See the crocodiles in the moat. So, this story has taken quite a turn different from the original story, hasn't it? But it's not over. There's much more to go. Meredith and Rumpelstiltskin lived a quiet country life, raising chickens and growing vegetables. Every now and then, when they needed something they couldn't make or grow, Rumpelstiltskin would spin up a little gold to buy it with. Now, they had a daughter, and she was just as sunny and clever as you would expect to be, having such devoted parents. When she was 16, they decided she ought to see more of the world, so every now and then they allowed her to take the gold into town to exchange it for coins and to do a little shopping. The goldsmith grew curious about the pretty country girl who came in with those odd coils of gold. He mentioned it to his friend, the baker, who mentioned it to the blacksmith, who mentioned it to the tax collector, who hurried to the palace and told the king. It may not surprise you to learn that the king hadn't changed a bit. If anything, he was greedier than before. As he listened, his eyes glittered. "I once knew a miller's daughter who could make gold like that," he said. "Unfortunately, she got away. Let's make sure this one doesn't." So, the next time Rumpelstiltskin's daughter went to see the goldsmith, 2 of the king's guards were waiting for her. In a red-hot minute, they grabbed her, threw her into a carriage, and they were speeding towards the palace. There they are, speeding towards the palace. Everywhere the fields lay barren. Sickly children stood begging beside the road. Nobody in the kingdom had anything anymore because the king had taken it all from them. Finally, they reached the palace. There were high walls around it and a moat full of crocodiles. Armed guards were everywhere, gnashing their teeth, clutching their swords, and peering about with shifty eyes. As the carriage went over the bridge and under the portcullis, the hungry people shook their fists at them. It was not a pretty sight. There's the hungry people shaking their fists at the shifty guards who were gnashing their teeth and clutching their swords and peering about with shifty eyes. Rumpelstiltskin's daughter was taken at once to the grand chamber where the king sat on his golden throne. He didn't waste time on idle pleasantries. There she is with him. Where did you get this? He asked, showing her the gold. Said Rumpelstiltskin's daughter. I thought so, said the king. Guards, take her to the tower and see what she can do with all that straw. Look familiar? All right, so we're going to pause here because the video is getting a little long. We will finish reading the story of Rumpelstiltskin's daughter tomorrow. You can tell that she's got a problem to solve, just like her mother did before her. So I hope you're enjoying Rumpelstiltskin's daughter and thinking about how ways the story is similar to, but different from, Rumpelstiltskin, the original story of Rumpelstiltskin. Thank you as well for reading with me about the settlers from the United Kingdom. Tomorrow we'll read about John Smith, the Native Americans called the Powhatan, and we might learn a little bit about the Pocahontas story as well. All right, thanks a lot. Have a most excellent day, and as they say in China, xie xie.